man who dies rich dies disgraced. Quite a provocative statement from a person who in 1901 was worth $480 million. He received that handsome sum by selling the company that he had built over his life. He connects the entire continent, constructs infrastructure, steel bridges, cities become made of steel, constructed vertically. Quite an incredible person, but what's arguably most incredible about him, effectively he gives away almost all the money that he makes. It's usually that people associate with his name over the steel industry, which is interesting. And what makes it interesting is how we should be thinking about capitalism and what it's actually all about. Because it may be the case that we're not thinking about it like the winners of capitalism think about it. We seem to emphasize the relationship between ability and success. And it's a very powerful idea that we tell and retell to one another. But the problem is that chance plays a pretty big role when it comes to success. Personality, we said, plays a pretty big role. And Carnegie starts to be an example of this. There's also a tendency in the story that we tell one another, when we look back at examples of success, we want to believe that it was all earned. But the truth is, it isn't. And I think he knew that, which helped him give away the money. Did he make his own luck? And I'm not suggesting he didn't have ability. Luck occurs when preparation meets opportunity. I think part of the reason why he gave it away when he did the way he did is because he understood that, and that's a feature of capitalism. It's one of those secrets that you don't learn until you get to the top. Like you're told, work hard and you'll get everything you want. Then you get to the top and you realize a lot of this had nothing to do with work. It just had to do with luck. Of course, the work helps you, but there's a huge randomness. The genetic lottery, your personality, all sorts of things. You know, think of your own life at the moment. Like there's certain things you could do to prepare, but you need an opportunity to have luck. Like you could be the most prepared person, but without an opportunity, it's not going to go. And similarly, maybe you have an opportunity, but if you haven't prepared, it doesn't go. If you are born into the 1%, right? This is not an earned thing, it just happens. It's harder for you, regardless of your ability or lack of ability, to fall out of wealth than it is for a person who's born in poverty to rise up out of poverty in spite of ability. Which suggests that ability, hard work, may not lead to the success that we think that it will, and we tell one another that it will. You should work hard and prepare as hard as possible because we're living in complicated times. But in the end, it's not entirely in your control. And to think that that's the case, that you are always in control, is an illusion. Really, in a tangible way, why does it matter to you? Because I think young people have a tendency, when they absorb the story, to start to put pressure on themselves that doesn't serve them. Destructive pressure. So you can have constructive pressure, you can have destructive pressure. I think if you believe ability equals success because you've been told that story, and you haven't asked the critical question, yeah, but what about chance and luck? If you haven't done that, you're going to put pressure on yourself, and you're going to compete with others in a way that doesn't serve you. You should be thinking clear about this as you prepare for success. I want to be clear, I'm not saying don't compete. I'm not saying don't put pressure on yourself. If you're familiar with me, you know I'm a tough love kind of guy. When you're thinking about luck, making your own luck, preparing for the opportunity that may or may not arrive, you got to realize that when it's there, you got to strike. And that's a skill that you can learn and you can train within yourself. You have to be, always ready. And it's quite an important thing. Remember, the science of economics, neoclassical economic theory, fuses distribution and allocation, treats them as one. That exacerbates the problem here described as the problem of administration. Administration of wealth, it's a tricky business. What do we mean by that? When you administer wealth, you're assuming a role of government there. If it starts to break the bonds of brotherhood, now we have ourselves a little bit of a problem. So what Carnegie is building here is an argument that suggests that the free market, left to its own devices, competition let loose, without an administrator, creates serious problems. So maybe another way of saying what he's saying is that the price of material wealth for the sake of itself is that you become spiritually impoverished, intellectually impoverished. Spiritually impoverished is an important way of saying it because he's talking about art and literature. At what point do you sort of realize that once you allow that imbalance within yourself to occur, it kind of goes downhill pretty quick because you end up, not intending to do so, but you end up being kind of a nasty force in the world, right? Like you're doing all the right things, you're competing, you're working hard, but the better you do, the looser the bonds of brotherhood. The better you do, the more of a monster you become to others, and maybe the more trapped you become by the luxuries that you're chasing. But it also produces some of the best fruit. The thing with capitalism is if it is operated the right way, with the right amount of regulatory control, it can really produce some beautiful things because at the center of the ideology, of the story, is that you should be punished for not working hard. That's part of the story, right? If you're not adding value, you shouldn't have access to the same stuff that those who add value do. And there's something like parental about that I think appeals to people. And I think that's one of the things he doesn't want to get rid of. So. The issue here is not about breaking the tree, it's about bending the tree so that we can access the fruit in the bonds of brotherhood. He has a very beautiful idea, but it's not an idealistic thing, right? He's actually a much more practical person. He says, look at where we are, look at the good stuff that all these laws produce. We just have to administer the wealth better and help more people gain access to the best fruits. I just want to emphasize, he's not like an academic giant. He's just writing in the 1800s, right? And people used to be able to write. Wouldn't it be nice if more people could do that now? Perhaps we should bend the tree a little bit to help them out. So that's the goal. Anyway. The idea is invest in families, invest in culture, invest in literature, invest in the spiritual wealth of your population. Those are the best fruits. And surely we could do a better job of administering those fruits to more people. So you basically have three options. Either the family should give the surplus wealth, or the government should distribute the surplus wealth, or rich people should give it away. In other words, the possessors of wealth themselves. So think of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as the example of number 3. Think of government healthcare as the example of number 2. And think of your inheritance as the example of number 1. Those are the 3 ways Carnegie is identifying as ways of administering the surplus value. He's asking, why do people give money to their little ones? So when you're in this game, the very first thing that you encounter is vanity. It's actually not affection for your kid. The problem starts with too much self-love. So that's one problem. The other problem is the fall in the value of the land itself. So sometimes you give it away, but its value doesn't hold. So there's a structural problem, and there's another problem, which is the vanity issue that leads to the folly. Right? So the question becomes, again, how do you bend the tree in such a way that they get access to the best fruits? The ratio is a very delicate thing. My dad has this famous saying, famous to me. Papa, are you watching this? So his saying is, when it comes to health and education, you can never spend enough money, he says. So those are things where you should dump money in. If it means your physical well-being, your spiritual well-being, your intellectual well-being, dump the money in. You can't spend enough. Now, if the kid wants to buy a Lambo, don't give him any money, because this is a bad idea for many reasons. But that's my dad. Other parents will have different kinds of ideas about this, right? So if you're going to spoil your kid, spoil them with school and with health. Don't spoil them with luxury products. Okay, so family, bad idea, he says, because it's possible to have an exception to the rule, but most of the time people are doing it out of vanity, not necessarily love for the child. Property values could go down, which is a problem. Charity is not a strategy to overcome a crisis. Charity is a nice thing, but it can't be the strategy for a society in terms of making available the best fruits of the tree. Bend the tree, don't break the tree. What is bending the tree? Bending the tree means a progressive tax system. Bending the tree also means ensuring that the few hands that are bending it, maybe, are able to administer those fruits. He's talking about the Spirit of Christ, because that's the time in which he's writing. Really, it means taking care of one another. That's what we're here for. We're not here for anything other than that. And if you have won the lottery and you've worked and taken advantage of the opportunities, you now have the responsibility to take care of one another. Along with government that does it in a similar way. The thing with government, it's a big, blunt institution, right? Whereas individuals can do things in a little bit more subtle ways. So government has a function that the individual can't perform, and the individual has a function the government can't perform. But both should be aiming toward the dignified life, sharing the best fruits, not breaking the tree, right? These are some of the things that he's after. You have to lead by example. You can't, you have to embrace a kind of modesty, right? It doesn't mean that you don't, have property. But what do you do with it? Do you demonstrate modesty? Do you demonstrate generosity? Do you demonstrate equanimity? Are these the things that you are leading with? Right? It's a kind of a fatherly figure that you have to be, not just to your kid, but to everyone that you can be that way too. And the more wealth you have, the more people you can reach, and the farther that example could lead. That is the duty of wealth. Fun fact, that's capitalism, hey, properly understood. What we have today is not that, for a lot of reasons. But that's what it could be, that's what maybe it should be, and that's what you must be. And of course, I must be as well. But I'm putting in that work. Do you care, or do you want to appear to care? A little tricky, yeah. Take that example. The spiritually wealthy who are stuck. Because that person, if you help that person in some way, right? You help them get unstuck in some way. Their work, like that spiritual wealth, can affect so many people, right? Because they already have the wealth. They just need a little bit of a break. So you're a finite creature, there's only so much you can give of yourself. How do you have the biggest impact? In capitalism 2021, I think look for the spiritually wealthy and stuck. Help them get unstuck. People, I'm very passionate about this because one of the things that I'd like to do with these digital devices and opportunities is basically take our message and spread it far and wide. And in the process of doing that, my goal is to employ as many graduate students as possible. Not just any graduate students, philosophy graduate students. Because it is those people, in my experience, that have such gentle, beautiful souls. That would be something that I would love to contribute as the message starts to spread. Because that beautiful spiritual wealth that they possess, that they work so hard for, can find a home in a student. I mean, my goodness, it just starts to go like more and more and more. So that's the goal down the road, thanks to the information age. But that's a moral duty that you hold. If you think life is about something other than that, you haven't understood anything, frankly. So first, generate the cash, basically, to be able to help, right? Because that's frankly why you're generating the cash in the first place. It's not an end, it's a means, money. That's all it is. So you're doing some good stuff, you're rewarded for it, great, that's capitalism. You get the cash, you have the cash, you're gonna give it away. Who do you give it away to? Part of it is taken from by way of taxation, which is the cost of being able to play the game of capitalism, right? So you pay your tax, but you can also help individuals with your ability to see who's worthy of assistance. This is the thing that business school should be teaching. That's my opinion. Because if you don't, like, I don't know how many business ethics professors are watching this video, but put this in your syllabus, hey? Because that's what you need to learn first.